Welcome to the Software People Stories. I'm Shiv.
I'm Chitra,
And I'm Gayatri.
We bring you interesting, untold stories of people.
associated with the creation
Or consumption of software-based solutions.
You'll hear stories of what worked.
and sometimes what didn't,
You will also hear very personal experiences.
and insights that would trigger your thoughts.
And inspire you to do even greater things.
In this episode, my co-host Gayatri is in conversation with Dan Balcauski, the founder and chief pricing officer at Product Tranquility, a company that helps high-volume B2B SaaS CEOs define pricing and packaging for new products. In this conversation, he talks about his student days in 1999 and getting into the peak of the dotcom boom, getting a job in Austin initially, and then moving into an engineering manager's role, which included envisioning product roadmaps, developing an interest in articulating the value of solutions, and then signing up for an MBA and doing work in the area of pricing and not finding too many courses that dealt with this. Learning by seeing the mistakes made by others during mergers and acquisitions made him feel stronger. And he set up this company about 4 years ago. He also talks about how he learns from other experts as well as books, and his views and recommendations on pricing during an inflated economy period, the impact of COVID on pricing patterns in both hardware and software, and much more. Listen on.
Hi, Dan. Welcome to Software People Stories. So happy to have you here.
Thank you for having me, Gayatri. I'm excited for a conversation today.
Dan, I know you are the founding as well as a great member of Product Tranquility. I have heard many of your podcasts. I would like you to introduce yourself with our listeners.
My name is Dan Balcauski. I am the founder and chief pricing officer at Product Tranquility. We are a small consultancy based in Austin, Texas, USA, where we focus on helping high-volume B2B SaaS CEOs define pricing and packaging for new and existing products.
I'll probably start from the beginning, right? I know you have a degree in computer science from Iowa, and then you also did your MBA from Kellogg. I see you have been part of several incubation products, and that's how you're getting into the product consulting. Get us all started as to, after your degree, what you have done and what is your, reason for getting into the product side of things.
Yeah, well, so it was computer engineering, not computer science, and it was Iowa State, not Iowa. Iowa is our bitter rival here in the U.S., but I wouldn't expect you to know that if you were overseas. So University of Iowa and Iowa State, not the same school. Also, we are not Ohio State, which is another common mistake. But no, I went and studied computer engineering. I was a bright-eyed high school senior in 1999, so think peak dotcom era, taking AP computer science courses, the dream of going and getting a computer engineering degree, and multimillionaire by 25 years old, as everyone in the dotcom era thought they were going to be. And so went and studied computer engineering, got a job out of school with a company down here in Austin. That's how I ended up down in Austin, and really was a fantastic company, fantastic experience, but I learned very quickly that the computer didn't care how angry I got at it. It still wouldn't run the code that I wrote, and I found that it wasn't the best suited for my personality. Ultimately, I worked my way into more of engineering management role, and in the company I was at, the engineering managers owned the product roadmap. It was kind of an interesting industry and organization where it was very engineering led. It was, very much, people talk about the early days of Google and how engineering friendly it was. We had 20% time before Google had 20% time for engineers. So if you had 20% of your time as an engineer, you could go work on fun side projects, right? And that's the legend behind products like Gmail, for example. We had very similar things, and therefore, it was founded by engineers. The leadership team was all engineers, PhD, electrical engineers, and therefore, they were like, we're engineers building tools for engineers. We know what the customers want. And so engineering owned product roadmaps. So as part of my responsibility as an engineering manager, and responsibility for QA lead, dev lead, project manager, personnel manager, also product manager, although we didn't call it that. And I realized very quickly that my interests align much more with, wait, how are these things that we're building, how do they create value for customers in dollars and cents for the business? And ultimately, as I realized that was kind of my long-term goal, I was like looking around, I was like, I'm not going to learn how to do this at a world-class level here. Again, with the way that company was structured, great from an engineering perspective, but definitely some weaknesses on product management front. So that led me to pursue my MBA. I went to a very strong marketing program. I didn't realize it then, but was very lucky. I didn't find out till much later that very few business schools have courses in pricing. So I received a lot of my theoretical grounding in pricing and product management when I was at Kellogg. And, long story short, post MBA, I spent a lot of time still on what I'd call the value creation side, product management, product strategy. Much of the company was acquiring other small bootstrapped software businesses. So I got to see a lot of mistakes in both product and pricing that those early stage companies make. So it was a really accelerated learning experience there. And also with my background, I ended up getting pulled into a lot of pricing exercises for the products I was a product manager for, just because of my background in a couple of different areas. Other folks kind of looked at each other, realized, hey, we don't really know how to do this either. So cut my teeth and made a lot of mistakes. Some of the theoretical grounding I got in business school, you realize, well, that might work in a consumer packaged goods if I'm pricing soup or shampoo, but necessarily doesn't work for pricing software. So made a lot of mistakes there, but ultimately, learned proper ways to go about it, and went off on my own about 4 years ago after multiple product strategy and leadership roles, and now I just focus on helping B2B SaaS CEOs and their teams build profitable businesses and helping them fulfill their company's mission.
Fantastic, Dan. There is so much to unpack from your introduction. So I will start with your current firm, right? I know you are an expert in terms of pricing, particularly for the SaaS solutions, and this is also a very, very dynamic environment to change. While you got your interest in pricing, how have you skilled yourself to be able to help in companies in this area?
Yeah, it's a constant learning process. I learn stuff every day. There's definitely folks I follow on LinkedIn and follow their blogs and watch videos, read a lot of books. Some of it is learned through practice. I learn a lot from clients. There's definitely groups of us pricing experts out there who get together in little communities and share notes and tricks. So I'm a member of some of those. I'd say a lot of my fundamental learning, though, I get from a lot of books, especially books written by other consultants who have been doing this for years or decades, and been lucky to have a couple of mentors as well who have done this for decades. So between standard structured learning going all the way back to MBA, experiential learning of doing it wrong a few times, kind of seeing what worked, continue to work with clients, structured approaches to I'm constantly reading. My reading list might bore the tears of other people, because I've probably read every single pricing book that there is. I listen to pricing podcasts. I hang out in pricing Slack groups. So that's it's a never-ending journey to continue to refine my understanding of the space.
That's amazing, Dan. In fact, what you're saying is essentially, the fundamentals from the group, but also continue to assimilate what's happening and learn from the clients. In fact, learning from the clients and actually doing it is the best way there is to learn something, and and eventually you become the expert at it. What are your views on pricing with inflation in there's so much of inflation happening across the globe in particularly
Mm,
if it's a SaaS software which is global in nature. So
mm.
what type of advice you have for people?
Yeah, yeah. Well, so there's a bunch of interrelated issues there, and for those of you who are interested, I write fairly regularly on my blog at producttranquility.com, but I have a really in-depth post on pricing during inflation that I have there. I'll give a quick kind of overview for the listeners. I think that you mentioned a couple of different threads, and each of those I think we could probably spend 30 minutes on. So I'll give a quick touch so we don't lose our audience entirely. The first thing you mentioned is price localization, or one of the things you mentioned is price localization, right? If we're pricing in multiple geographies. That's an entire sort of topic in and of itself. I'm going to set that aside for right now. Pricing during inflation is interesting. So, I think one thing that we saw happen is during the pandemic that we all suffered through, this psychological worldwide experiment that none of us signed up for, that I'm sure we'll be studying the effects of for years on end. In my world of pricing, one of the things that happened is companies saw that the world was in crisis, and there were some interesting pricing things that happened. I was actually just listening to a podcast the other day, and a guy was talking about he was responsible for New York State had paid him $40 million at the height of the COVID outbreak to go acquire ventilators from China. And what was a $6,000 ventilator one day, a month later they were going on the market for like $300,000 each. So within the pandemic,
What?
right, for ventilators, you saw that happen. There were some other interesting things that happened, right, where I happened at the time. Everyone went remote, and if you recall, what happened is everyone realized, oh, I've got to work from home. I don't have a microphone. I don't have a webcam. Well, Logitech and Yeti and all of the microphone and webcam manufacturers, they all ran out of stock. So you go to Amazon, or wherever it might be, wherever you live, and they were, from the manufacturer, how you'd normally purchase, were out of stock, and maybe it was $40 for a webcam. Well, you could buy secondhand, someone reselling it for $400. So you saw that kind of behavior, right? Or hand sanitizer. But in software, it was a little bit different, right? Software didn't have this marginal cost of goods problem, and supply is relatively unconstrained, right? We just copy more bits, right? It doesn't cost us any more to produce. So their supply constraint didn't hit software. And instead, software came to this sort of crucial need. And so software companies kind of looked at this and were like, we don't want to get painted as the bad guy. We might have normal price increases, say 5 or 10% a year on a normal time. But this is sort of crisis times. We don't want to look like we're taking advantage of folks. And so you saw a lot of companies pausing price increases who weren't under these, more physical good supply chain constraints that some of the other companies were. And so then what happened is you come out of the pandemic, you see all the government stimulus, Jay Powell on the our side, but central bankers around the world and federal governments around the world that had passed protections and stimulus bills to make sure their people didn't get thrown out on the streets and didn't lose their jobs, and so printed a massive amount of fiat currency around the world. And so we end up in this post-COVID place where we've got, okay, now I haven't done my normal price increases for several years, and at a macroeconomic level, we have massive 50-year highs of monetary inflation. And so I think, it impacted software. All industries got affected, but it affected software kind of uniquely. So look, I think at any pricing is simple, but it's not easy. For any decision, and this applies to our discussion on inflation, you really need to evaluate two things. As a business leader, as I make a change, what is my difference in expected revenue? and what is the difference in costs incurred. Right. And so as I think about, okay, I've got, inflation is a cost. It's eroding the value of, the revenue you bring in. Right. And it's, then you're seeing, it depends on your internal cost of goods, but we also saw, cost of labor spike, right? And tech companies were very impacted by that. Of course, they were also raising massive amounts of money from venture capitalists, et cetera, and doing IPOs. So there was a lot of money sloshing around in that ecosystem, but there were record amounts of money being paid to technical talent to fund this boom. And if you look at the P&L of a software business, it's mostly your engineering staff and the people, right? Because the marginal cost of goods sold is relatively small, right? The bits have very low variable cost. So we've got to look at, okay, we're losing this on the cost side. If we raise prices, we may see some people leave, but then we're also probably going to see an uptick. And so you really need to think about modeling that out. So one of the ways, a couple of tactics, if we can look at it, I would say overall, having a clear goal at the executive level for your inflation revenue opportunity is clear. So you want everyone to be on the same page of like, what is it we're trying to achieve? Because that's going to be, for anything you're doing in business, right? You should always have a goal. Like if everyone's running around just doing activities, clear goal, like you're probably in a bad place, right? But I think this is one of those
that
areas
goes
you
without
want to
saying
make sure.
too.
Exactly. Well, it goes without saying, but you'd be surprised how often that is the case. People are like, I want to optimize my pricing. And you say, what are you optimizing? And they're like, we don't know. And you're like, well, then that question is sort of meaningless. So we need to say, when you say I want to optimize my pricing, it needs to be for what? Are we optimizing to, maximize profit, to maximize revenue, to maximize customer LTV, right? Some other unit economic goal. And then we want to look at, not all products and not all customers are the same. Right? So we don't just want to take a price increase and spread it like butter over bread, right? Eat completely evenly. There's going to be some pockets of customers that are going to be more price sensitive. There's going to be some products that are more price sensitive. So if you're running a business and you've got a portfolio of products, some of those products might be in intensely price competitive, more commoditized spaces. Some of those products might be highly differentiated, and the ones that are highly differentiated, you're going to have more ability to raise prices because the value you create is unique, and customers can't really leave and go get it elsewhere, right? Or maybe you've with a lot of what I see, a lot of software companies are just generally undercharging, and so they haven't been truly charging the amount for the value they have. And then some other things you want to maybe look at are like, has inflation influenced customer preferences? So, one of these, this is the longest run up to a possible recession I've ever seen in my life. I think everyone keeps waiting for some sort of hard landing, and it keeps on getting pushed out further. We'll see. I don't want to jinx us, knock on wood. But, inflation and recession tend to go hand in hand for whatever reason. Now those are disjointed, and I don't know what exactly is going on. But in a recession as well, you're going to have a shift in value propositions from your customer base. So if you think about the go-go market, when everyone's flying high with all the stimulus in 2020 and 2021, it's all about let's maximize market share, let's get revenue, let's grow as fast as possible. And as it shifts to, oh no, we've got super high inflation, we're heading into recession, now potentially it changes to your customers are more enamored with how is this going to save us money? How is this going to reduce our risk? And so that can shift your differentiated value in the market. That can shift how customers are evaluating, your price value ratio. So we want to think through kind of all those things, ultimately, thinking through those at a very high level. Again, we could talk about this at length. I'll stop there. Hopefully that gives enough of a taste of how people can start to unwind this.
It almost feels like a global economics in terms of macroeconomics, understand the macroeconomics, and identify how the growth is happening for the product, and factor that into your risk profile of the leaders, right? And then create those models. I love it, and I hope our listeners also have understood even 3% of what you told, Dan. They would be wiser of the lot around product pricing. Uh, so Dan, let me ask this. What kind of a challenges did you have when you had to start becoming a consultant? I mean, leaving a cushy job, leaving a nice job, right? It is not easy. What? How did you make that happen? How did you make the decision?
Gayatri asked him what challenges he faced when he became a consultant. The answer to that question and a lot more interesting stuff in the next episode. Don't miss it.
We thank Siddharth for the music and Anita for promoting the Software People stories.
If you like this episode,
Please subscribe on your favorite podcast client.
And spread the word in your network.
if you'd like to share your story,
Contact us at podcasts@pm-powerconsulting.com.